My name is Margaret. I'm 35 years old. Today I'm going to talk about the day that I was fired after my father's funeral, so I decided to become a competitor of my old company until I bankrupted them. It's a pleasure to have you here. Stay tuned until the end and tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far my story has gone. And click on like, subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss the next stories here on the channel. I stood by my father's casket, my hands cold and trembling, feeling like I was holding on to the last thread of who I used to be. My heels sank into the soft grass beneath me as they lowered him into the earth, and something inside me went quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, but from something breaking silently, all at once. He used to say I was made of steel, that I had his strength in me. I never believed him until I had to hold myself together while people hugged me and said things like, "He's in a better place," or "You were such a good daughter." I didn't feel like a good daughter. I felt empty. I hadn't cried during the entire funeral. Not until I got home and saw the sweater he used to wear when we had coffee on Sunday mornings. That's when I folded, on the kitchen floor, holding that old sweater like it was going to bring him back. The next day, I returned to work. No one asked me how I was doing. No one said, "Take your time." My manager, Brenda, simply asked me to update the team dashboard and join a meeting at 2. I was still in black, my eyes still puffy, but I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. 10 years in that company. 10 years of arriving early, staying late, never saying no. And in less than 24 hours after burying my father, I was back at my desk like none of it mattered. 3 days later, they let me go. Brenda called me into a glass meeting room with fake sympathy in her eyes. "We're restructuring," she said. "It's not personal." I stared at her. My ears buzzed. My father had died 5 days ago. 5. And they were telling me this now? I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. My hands were shaking again. I remember clutching my notebook just to have something to hold on to. "We appreciate your contribution to the company," she added, sliding a folder across the table. Inside, a release form, a pathetic severance package, and a line about how they wished me all the best. I walked out carrying a cardboard box. My things. My coffee mug. The little photo of me and Dad at the Grand Canyon. My sticky notes, my headset. I passed by co-workers who suddenly avoided eye contact, as if my dismissal was contagious. When I got home, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, engine off, just staring at my front door. I had no one to call. My sister, Helen, wouldn't have offered sympathy. We had grown apart. She had always said I was too intense, that I took work too seriously. She had her family, her life, her opinions. She wouldn't understand. So I went inside, took off my shoes, and sat again on that same kitchen floor where I had cried into my father's sweater. That night I made a promise. Not out loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, steady vow I whispered to myself like a prayer. I will never depend on anyone like that again. Never let them decide when I matter. Never again give so much of myself to people who will discard me like nothing. The next morning, I opened my father's old desk drawer. I hadn't touched it since he passed. It still smelled faintly like him, aftershave and ink. He used to spend hours there scribbling ideas, budgeting plans he never followed through with, drawing sketches on napkins and yellow pads. I opened his old notebook. Inside, page after page of business ideas. Most were too ambitious. Some were absurd. But one caught my eye. A simple service for helping small local businesses manage online orders and logistics. He had called it Hand in Hand. He even had a rough logo. My father had never been able to make it happen. He was always working 2 jobs, raising us alone after Mom left. But he believed in it. And suddenly, I felt something stir in me, like I could almost hear his voice again, saying, "You're stronger than you think." I spent the rest of that day rereading his notes, highlighting the feasible parts, sketching my own ideas in the margins. For the first time in weeks, I felt something. Not joy, but purpose. I didn't know where to start. I had no tech background, no investors, no office. Just pain, anger, and a notebook full of unfinished dreams. But I had time, and I had nothing left to lose. It was exactly 8 days after I was let go when I found out who took my place. I wasn't even looking for that information. I had already deleted all my work accounts, blocked Brenda's number, and unsubscribed from every company newsletter. I was trying to move on, but a message popped up on LinkedIn from Claire, someone I used to eat lunch with occasionally. She never had much to say, always hovered near the office gossip without fully joining in. But she was sharp, observant. Her message was short. You didn't hear this from me, but your replacement is Connor's wife. No experience. Just thought you'd want to know. Connor, the director, the same one who'd sent an automated condolence email after my dad died. I didn't respond. I just stared at the screen for a long time. So that was it. They hadn't restructured. They hadn't downsized. They'd cleared a spot for family. And I was disposable. That night I told Helen. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping for solidarity. She tilted her head like she always did when she was trying to seem supportive, but still better than me. Well, Margaret, you always took that job too seriously. That place was never going to love you back. I didn't expect them to love me, Helen. I just thought 10 years meant something. She sighed, already looking at her phone. Maybe it's a good thing. You were always so intense about your career. Maybe now you can relax. Focus on something else. Like what? She shrugged. I don't know. Settle down. Try dating again. I nodded slowly and excused myself to the bathroom, where I cried with the water running so she wouldn't hear. That weekend, I started building a wall. Not a real one. An emotional one. I deleted contacts, unfollowed coworkers, packed away anything that reminded me of the office. For days I didn't leave the house. Just me and Dad's notebook, a laptop that barely worked, and a stubborn rage that wouldn't go away. I kept rereading his ideas. He had so many thoughts about small businesses, how they were often ignored by bigger services, how most software catered to giants, not mom-and-pop shops. He wanted to change that. He had sketched out a plan to create affordable tools for order management, inventory, and online visibility. Nothing fancy, just enough to help them survive. I started making outlines. I listed every feature that would make sense. I researched platforms, built a wireframe on paper. I didn't even know what I was doing, not really. But it kept me from unraveling. Then I remembered Jacob. He had worked with Dad at the post office. He was retired now, but he used to help with tech stuff on the side. I called him, nervous that he'd forgotten me. Margaret. Of course I remember you. Your dad was my best friend. How are you holding up? We spoke for over an hour. I told him about the funeral, the job, the notebook. You think it could work? I asked him. There was a pause. Then he said, I think your dad would be damn proud of you for trying. He agreed to help me set up a basic prototype. Nothing too complicated. Just something to show a potential client. That became our goal, one client. One. We called it Project Hand in Hand. Jacob had a neighbor who owned a flower shop and was struggling with online orders. She didn't even have a real website. We asked to meet her. Her name was Linda, and she looked like she hadn't slept in a month. I'm losing money every week, she told us. I can't afford those big platforms. They take a cut of everything. We offered to help her for free. In exchange, she'd let us test the prototype. She agreed. For the next 3 weeks, Jacob and I worked every day. He handled the back end. I managed communication, scheduling feedback. I watched tutorials at night and sent updates to Linda every morning. I hadn't felt this useful in months. The first time an online order came in through our system, Linda called me crying. It worked, Margaret. It actually worked. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the phone to my chest after the call ended. One client. That was all I needed to believe it wasn't just grief talking. The next day, Linda mentioned us to a friend who owned a small bakery. And just like that, we had our second meeting. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell to receive all notifications so you don't miss the next story. I didn't even notice the folded page until I dropped the notebook. It landed with a soft thud on the floor near my desk, its pages fanning out in all directions. As I knelt to pick it up, a small sheet of paper slipped from between 2 pages near the back. It wasn't notebook paper. It was thinner, the kind my dad used to keep in his wallet. There was a single sentence, handwritten in his unmistakable print, strong and slanted, always a little too tight. I built these dreams for her. I read it 3 times before I could breathe. He meant me. There was no doubt in my mind. My name wasn't there, but I could hear his voice in those words. Quiet, private, meant to be found when it mattered. Maybe he knew I'd need it someday. Maybe he never got the chance to give it to me. Either way, it broke something open in me. Not in a painful way. In a way that felt like light breaking through fog. He had believed in me. Not just in my strength. In my ability to build something real. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just kept turning those words over in my head. I built these dreams for her. It made everything feel more urgent. More possible. And more personal. By the next morning, I had a list of 10 businesses I wanted to approach. I knew it was too soon. That we barely had a product. But I needed to try. I started small. Sending emails. Introducing the idea. Offering to help for free just like we had with Linda. Only 2 people replied. But that was enough. One of them was Karen, who ran a local bookstore. She told me on the phone, "I'm drowning in manual orders. I don't have time to manage anything digital. But if you can make something simple, I'll try it." We met in her shop that weekend. Books stacked to the ceiling, dust in the air, the smell of paper and old coffee. Karen was in her 60s, tired but kind, and deeply suspicious of anything that sounded too technical. Jacob and I spent the next 2 weeks customizing the dashboard just for her. No jargon. No clutter. Just 3 buttons. Inventory, orders, and delivery. She called it a miracle the first time she used it. And then she did something that changed everything. She posted about it in a small Facebook group for local business owners. The comments poured in. Not thousands. Not even hundreds. But enough. Enough to fill my inbox with people asking, "Can we try it too?" That's when Jacob pulled me aside. "We need help," he said. "We can't scale this alone." He was right. We needed funding, developers, support. And most of all, we needed to protect the work. The code, the name, the idea. It was still just ours, still fragile. But I hesitated. "I don't want to turn this into something corporate," I told him. "I don't want it to become like them." He nodded. "Then let's do it differently. Let's stay small. Focused. But real. Make it count." I trusted him. So we filed for an LLC. We trademarked hand in hand. We bought a domain. I wrote the copy myself, simple, honest, no fluff. Just what we offered, who we were and why we cared. And it worked. Our inbox filled up again. We started booking weekly calls. Helping each business customize their version of the tool. I worked 16-hour days. I barely remembered to eat. But it didn't feel like work. It felt like finally doing what I was supposed to. Until one day Brenda showed up. Not in person. Not yet. She sent me a message through LinkedIn. "Hi Margaret. Hope you're doing well. I've been hearing about Hand in Hand. Impressive growth. Would love to connect sometime. Let me know if you're open to a conversation." I stared at the screen. I hadn't thought about her in weeks. She belonged to the part of my life I had buried. I hadn't expected her to notice me again. Not like this. I didn't reply. Instead, I clicked on her profile and scrolled. She was still at the same company. Still managing the same team. The same team that once included me. I should have felt triumphant. I didn't. I felt wary. Exposed. And more than anything, I felt protective of the work, the clients, the little empire we were building from scraps of grief and grit. Jacob and I decided to be quiet about our next steps. We started a wait list. We limited who we onboarded. We moved carefully. But the more people used our tool, the more people talked. And then it happened. A woman named Emily, who owned a catering business, reached out. "I love what you're doing," she said. "It reminds me of something I saw at my last job, only better. Cleaner." I asked where she used to work. She named my old company. Specifically the logistics division, Connor's department. "Somehow," she said, "this feels like the version we wanted to build but never got the green light for." I felt it then. A chill. They knew. Somehow they were watching. And then Jacob called me late that night. "They've just launched something new," he said. "Branded as an internal innovation. But Margaret, it looks a lot like ours." It wasn't paranoia. They had copied us. Not line for line. But the flow, the core functions, even the design philosophy. Their new product looked like a colder, stripped-down version of what we had built. It had the same navigation logic, the same three-panel structure I'd insisted on for usability. It even used the phrase built for small businesses, like it had been pulled straight from my pitch deck. Only now it was theirs. My old company had named it Streamline Pro. They were launching it quietly to select clients under the guise of internal innovation, like they'd created it from scratch. But Jacob and I could see through it instantly. "This isn't a coincidence," Jacob said, pacing in his garage office. "They've either seen your demo deck or had someone listening." I nodded slowly, trying to stay calm. My heart was thudding, but my brain was locked into survival mode. "We didn't share the code," I said. "We didn't even launch a public beta. How could they?" And then it hit me. Claire. The woman who first messaged me about Connor's wife taking my old position. The only person who knew both sides. The only one who ever hinted she was still watching from the inside. I pulled up our old messages. The most recent one was still there, untouched since the day I got it. But it wasn't her. It was me. I had vented. I had talked about my father's idea, the mission behind our product, the gap in the market. I had trusted someone with the outline, just the broad strokes, but enough for a team like theirs to fill in the rest. My stomach turned. I hadn't protected it. I had just wanted to be seen, to be understood. And now they were using it against me. Jacob watched me process it. "We can't go after them legally," he said carefully. "Not unless we want a war. And we don't have the money for that." "I don't want a war," I said. "I want to beat them." He smiled faintly. "That we can do." We spent the next week rebuilding. Not the code, but the message. If they were going to position themselves as the sleek, corporate version of what we had made, we would lean into being the opposite. Real. Accessible. Human. Everything my father wanted when he scribbled that first logo. We renamed the system slightly, hand-in-hand local, and added a tagline beneath it. Built by people who know what it's like to be ignored. It worked. Karen, Linda, and our other early clients backed us up without hesitation. They posted about their experience. They shared before and after screenshots. They tagged us, praised us, made noise in the exact corners where word of mouth mattered most. And then something unexpected happened. We got an email from Diane Wexler, a mid-sized business owner who ran a chain of boutique grocery stores in the Midwest. She wasn't small-scale like our other clients, but she wasn't massive either. Somewhere in the middle. "I've seen both platforms," she wrote. "Yours speaks to my customers. Theirs speaks to shareholders." She asked for a meeting. I wore my dad's old watch. The one he wore to every job interview. Even the ones he knew he wouldn't get. It made me feel braver. The meeting was virtual. Diane was sharp, no nonsense, and not easily impressed. But she asked real questions about scalability, customization, onboarding time. I answered every one. Not like a pitch. Like a person who'd built the damn thing with her own hands. By the end of the call, she nodded once and said, "Send me the terms." She signed a pilot deal for 6 locations. It was the biggest moment we'd had. Jacob called it a turning point. I called it my line in the sand. From that point on, I stopped hiding. I started speaking publicly. Not with press releases, but through small podcasts, LinkedIn posts, community forums. I talked about my dad, about what it meant to be discarded, about building something that doesn't treat people like numbers. And then the second email came. From Brenda. "Margaret, I'm reaching out again, because we're actually interested in discussing a potential partnership. Your platform is gaining attention. We'd love to explore a collaborative opportunity." I didn't reply. She emailed again 3 days later. This time she CC'd Connor. I forwarded it to Jacob. He replied with a single sentence. "Want me to handle it?" I said no. This one was mine. I wrote back the following. "Brenda, thank you for your interest in what we've built. At this time, we're fully focused on serving clients who believed in our mission from the beginning. Best of luck with Streamline Pro. Margaret Hall, founder, hand-in-hand local." I stared at the founder title for a moment before hitting send. It felt right. That weekend, I visited my father's grave for the first time since the funeral. I brought coffee, his favorite kind, with a splash of hazelnut creamer. I sat by the stone and read him a letter I'd written. I told him about Linda, Karen, Diane, about the prototype, about Streamline Pro, about Brenda's emails. I told him everything. And I ended with this. You were right. I am made of steel. But I needed to break first to believe it. The wind shifted. Leaves blew across the ground. I closed my eyes and listened. I thought I might cry. But I didn't. Not this time. The message from Helen came on a Monday morning, just as I was getting ready to pitch a new client. Short and cryptic like always. I found something. It's about Dad. Can we talk? I didn't answer right away. My history with Helen was difficult. We weren't close, and we never had been. Growing up, we barely shared more than blood and a hallway. I was always the serious one. She was the free spirit. She rolled her eyes at my ambition, and I rolled mine at her detachment. Still, I couldn't ignore her message. Not when it mentioned Dad. We met at a coffee shop near her house. She chose the spot, of course, some modern loud place that smelled like lavender and cost too much for a latte. She was already there when I arrived, scrolling her phone and sipping something pink through a metal straw. Wow, she said when she saw me. You look official. I was wearing a blazer. Nothing fancy, but next to Helen, who looked like she'd stepped out of a yoga ad. I guess I did seem out of place. Just came from a meeting, I said, sitting down. She pushed a small manila envelope across the table. I was cleaning out Mom's attic, she said. Found this. Inside were old papers. Some were just sketches. My father's handwriting familiar and chaotic. But there was one letter, folded and yellowed, addressed simply to my girls. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't open it, Helen said. Thought maybe we should do it together. We sat in silence while I unfolded the letter. It wasn't long. To my daughters, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get a chance to say everything I wanted. I wasn't always the best at expressing things when I should have. I hope you forgive me for that. You both are different. And that's a gift, not a problem. Margaret, I see how hard you work. I see your fire. I know it's not always appreciated, but one day it will be. I started a business idea a long time ago. Something I hoped to pass on someday, but life had other plans. I called it Hand in Hand. I built it for you, Margaret. It was always yours. Don't let anyone make you feel small. You were never meant to be. Love, Dad. My throat tightened. My fingers curled around the page. I had to blink several times to stay composed. Helen leaned forward. I didn't know he wrote that. Neither did I. We sat quietly. Then she said softly, I think he always knew you'd make something of yourself. I didn't understand it before. I do now. I looked at her surprised. You were never interested in any of this. I wasn't, she admitted. But I see what you've built, Margaret. I Googled your platform. People are talking. It's helping real businesses. Her voice cracked slightly. And I guess I didn't realize how much he believed in you. I folded the letter gently and slid it back into the envelope. Why are you really showing me this now? Helen hesitated. Because I was jealous. That I didn't expect. You always had a direction. A reason. I was always floating. I made fun of you because I didn't know how to be like you. And I hated that Dad seemed to admire that about you more than he ever said about me. I didn't know what to say. I'm not here for anything, she added quickly. I don't want money. I don't want a stake. I thought you should have that letter. For the first time in years, I saw my sister not as someone who stood in opposition to me, but as someone just as lost in her own way. I nodded. Thanks, Helen. And for once, it didn't feel like a forced truce. It felt real. Back at home, I stared at the letter again. Every word burned into me. It was always yours. It changed something. Not because I needed validation, but because I realized my father had believed in my vision long before I even had one. I wasn't just continuing something he left behind. I was finishing what he started, what he never got the chance to see through. That week, I made a decision. We were going to expand. Not wildly, not recklessly, but intentionally. Into markets my father cared about, working-class neighborhoods, underserved regions, family-run shops like the ones he always supported. I met with Jacob. I want to grow this, I told him. But not for funding. For legacy. He nodded. Let's get to work. We started mapping a strategy. Not just where we could go, but why. We launched a campaign called Rooted Together, highlighting stories of our clients and how local business shapes local identity. The reaction was stronger than I expected. More referrals, more signups, a few interviews, and slowly, steadily, we began signing real contracts. Not handouts, partnerships. And then, just as things were finally settling into momentum, I got a call from Claire. I hadn't heard from her since I realized what had happened. Part of me didn't want to pick up, but I did. "Margaret," she said, her voice tight. "You need to see this." She sent a screenshot. It was a company memo from my old firm. They were planning to pivot Streamline Pro into a white-label tool to license it to third-party developers overseas. "It's a mess," she said. "They're losing clients. Diane Wexler left them last week. And Connor? He's blaming everyone but himself." I didn't feel joy. I didn't gloat. But I did feel something else. Closure. "They're asking questions about how the platform was conceived," Claire added. "There's a lot of noise. People remembering things. Like who really had the original idea." I thanked her. Told her to be careful. And then I closed my laptop, stood up, and walked to my father's desk. I took the letter out one more time, read it again, then placed it into a frame beside my workspace. It didn't matter if the world gave me credit. It mattered that I knew, and that he had known all along. It had been nearly a year since I stood in front of my father's grave and made that silent promise. 1 year since I'd been let go from the job I gave everything to. 1 year since I opened that old notebook and chose to start over, with nothing but grief and an idea. Now I had 10 full-time clients, a modest office, 2 part-time employees, and something resembling stability. I had taken the wreckage of one life and piece by piece built another. I was even sleeping better. Then the email came. Subject line, urgent request hand in hand. It was from Connor. I stared at the screen, mouth dry. I hadn't heard that name in almost a year. I'd scrubbed him from my life the same way I had deleted the work contacts, wiped the calendars, and packed up my old coffee mug. But here he was. "Margaret, I hope this finds you well. I'm reaching out because we're exploring new partnerships and acquisition opportunities. Streamline Pro is undergoing major changes, and your platform, hand in hand, has gained significant attention. I'd like to discuss a potential merger or acquisition. We believe a collaboration could be mutually beneficial. Let me know if you're open to a conversation. Best, Connor." I read it 3 times. A merger? An acquisition? He had the nerve to come to me now, as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't replaced me days after my father died. As if he hadn't handed my job to his wife and lied to my face. And now, because his house was crumbling, he wanted a lifeline. I didn't reply. Not at first. Instead, I called Jacob. He listened quietly while I read him the email. "Interesting," he said. "What do you think?" "I think he's scared. And I think you have what he wants. That's power, Margaret. But what are you going to do with it?" I sat with it for 2 days. I thought about my father, the things he never got to do. I thought about how many nights I stayed up learning code, cold emailing shop owners, fixing bugs at 3 a.m. I thought about Linda, who now had 3 employees, because of the online growth we helped her achieve. I thought about all the people Connor's company ignored, underpaid, and discarded. And I thought about me. Not the woman who had cried on the kitchen floor holding a sweater, but the one who had learned to stand up again. I replied with a single sentence. "I'm open to a meeting." We met in a neutral space, a downtown conference room Connor had booked. He looked older, tired, still dressed in his usual slick, casual uniform. But the sharpness was gone. There was a hint of desperation behind his smile. "Margaret, you look well." I sat across from him, said nothing. He cleared his throat. "Look, I know we didn't part on the best terms, but I've been watching your growth. It's impressive." I kept waiting for him to say the word sorry, but it never came. He talked numbers, valuation, market reach, licensing. He offered me a large sum, enough to buy a house, retire early, live comfortably for a long time. And then he said the one thing I had hoped he wouldn't. "We could use your brand voice. People trust you. We bring that authenticity under our umbrella, and we scale." That was it. He didn't want to build anything together. He wanted to own it, absorb it, Strip it of its heart, its origin, its name. He wanted the story, but not the struggle. I let him finish, then stood. You said this could be mutually beneficial. But you don't mean me. You mean you. Margaret. No. I said, calm but firm. You don't get to buy what you threw away. You don't get to inherit a legacy you didn't help build. He leaned back, annoyed. Look, don't let pride get in the way of a good deal. I smiled slowly. This isn't pride. This is principle. And then I left. That night, I walked to my father's grave for the first time in months. I brought him something. A framed certificate. Our official LLC paperwork. With my name signed at the bottom as founder and CEO. I placed it against the stone. You were right, I whispered. I am made of steel. I sat for a long while. No tears. Just peace. A breeze passed through the trees, and I imagined it was him listening. Before I left, I whispered one last thing. I kept my promise. 2 weeks later, Helen called. She had gotten a job. Nothing fancy, just a part-time position at a local gallery. She said she liked the routine, the structure. And then she asked something I never expected. Do you need help? At the company, I mean. I'm good with people. I could handle clients. I didn't answer right away. We were still learning how to be in each other's lives again. But eventually I said, let's try it. She smiled through the phone. Okay, let's. A few months later, a small article came out in a local business magazine. They did a spotlight on women-led startups making an impact. My face was there, along with a photo of the flower shop. Linda holding a bouquet next to the caption, From Grief to Growth, The Rise of Hand in Hand. I didn't frame the article, but I kept a copy in my drawer. Just as a reminder that I was never disposable, that I didn't need validation from the people who once made me feel small, that sometimes the best revenge is to simply live well, and to build something so strong, they can never take it from you again. If you like stories like these, click like, subscribe, activate the bell, and send it to someone you think will also like it.